Shalom, Kal Halal, Yahweh Bashem Yahushai, Bahashem Rakah Kodash. Double honors to the elder apostles and elder bishops of GMS, including the elders that came before them that taught us this truth. Shalom and salutations to all the brothers that push the word of truth and in sincerity, the hopeful elect tabernacle of David. Shalom and salutations in as well. Shalom and salutations to the 144,000 and the 1/3, the elect of Israel. All right, so a quick one. Going back on rumors here, Jeremiah 51:46. At least your heart faint, and ye hear, Salah, and ye fear for the rumor that shall be heard in the land. A rumor shall both come 1 year, and after that, in another year shall come a rumor, and violence in the land, ruler against ruler. I'm going to read that in the NLT. But do not panic. Don't be afraid when you hear the first rumor of approaching forces. For rumors will keep coming year by year. Violence will erupt in the land as leaders fight against each other. So they're talking about a forever war here. Okay, let's see, where is it? Forever war. Why Ukraine war will last years. Redacted with Natalie and Clayton Morris. 47 minutes ago, this just came up. We're going to listen to a little bit of this and get their perspective on what they believe is going on. And this will be the last war. World War III will be the last war. Right? Well, you got World War III, and then you got the war in heaven. Right? Which is actually the last war. But let's listen to this. All right, take it away.
The United States appears ready to admit its true intentions in Ukraine. It was never about the people. It was never about the freedom of Ukraine at all. That was, of course, a joke. Remember when Kamala Harris stood up and said, we're going into Ukraine. We're supporting Ukraine for democracy.
When America stands for her principles.
Yeah, we're standing for democracy.
Right.
We're standing for freedom, right? Our principles.
Yeah.
That's what it was never about that. They could care less about the people of Ukraine. They could care less about the freedom of the people of Ukraine. They don't care about that at all. Rather, its true intentions, though, are to create a forever war in Ukraine, something we've been warning about here on this show for many, many months, and a singular goal with that forever war, which is to degrade and destroy Russia's capacity to fight. That is it, full stop. That's the mission. Over the weekend, we got some fresh insights and corroboration of that from journalists, but also members of the United States Congress and military leaders about their intentions to support the most corrupt government in Europe for many, many years to come. So here is Branko Marcetic over at the Responsible Statecraft. He does a good job summarizing last week's movements. Are U.S. officials signaling a new forever war in Ukraine? You already know the answer to that. So here's what Branko says. He says, this increasingly looks to be the case. On Saturday, the Financial Times reported that the United States officials are privately girding for what increasingly looks like a war of attrition that will last well into next year, echoing an earlier Wall Street Journal report that military strategists and policymakers across the West are already starting to think about next year's spring offensive and about how to prepare for a protracted conflict. So they're already thinking about next year's spring offensive because the first release of that spring offensive was a real hit. So we're already thinking about the sequel. We're already planning the sequel for this one. On Saturday, we have this information now from the Financial Times, then the Wall Street Journal, and now this is the front page of the Wall Street Journal just a few days ago. The Wall Street Journal cites a number of U.S. officials who say why Russia's war in Ukraine could run for years. And I love they call it Russia's war in Ukraine, when the only reason it's being protracted and elongated is because of NATO. In the extension of it, that's the reason it could run for years. It's not because Russia wants to extend it for years. It's because NATO does. That's its true intentions.
Well, let's not forget who has been funding the war in Ukraine since 2014. That is the International Monetary Fund. Europe and the United States has been funding Ukraine, bombing the Donbass since 2014. Also, they were supporting those same people going into Crimea, which Russia stopped. Right, and so whose war? Ukraine has been at war for a decade now. So,
right. Well, yeah, exactly. And someone in the chat says, "Well, a forever war means just extending it into 2024." No, because that's just That's like if you had a scale of like when someone says, how far in the future do you think this is going to go? Well, it could extend into 2024, but we're going to get into the details of other policymakers who see this going on for many, many years to come. So, how many of you, show of hands, honestly believe that the United States, NATO, full stop, they're out of Ukraine in 2024? How many people? Just a show of hands, let us know in the chat, yes or no. Do you think this is over in 2024, or does this extend for many, many years? And not in the sense like trench warfare, but like a permanent garrison state continues in perpetuity funding a military operation in Ukraine. Think about that in the long term. Go ahead, David.
Well, I was going to say, Afghanistan is a forever war. That was 20 years, and make no mistake, we are still there, and we will never leave. We're not there officially ever, but we have a base, we have all this, so we're always going to be there. So that is a forever war.
Yeah, and when U.S. taxpayer dollars go to fund things in Afghanistan or Iraq, we're building another base in Iraq, but that war is over. Mission accomplished in Iraq. So what more evidence do you need of a forever war?
Well, it's a jumping off spot. All right. How is America gonna fare in the Valley of Yehoshaphat without those army bases in Iraq? You got to think about things like that.
And so again, the Wall Street Journal is saying this could run on for many, many years to come. And they cite a number of U.S. officials who admit Ukraine can never win this war. They say they can never win this war. But they can't have Russia win it either. There's the rub, right? Therefore, it will drag on for years to come.
Therefore, it will result in mutually assured destruction.
But we recently talked about this with Ramzi Baroud. What happens then is that is the template that happened to the Middle East, right? Where we saw previously prosperous places or places that at least had, a lot of more advanced civilization than we like to think they had. Libya, Syria, right? Places that were advancing their GDP, advancing their standard of life, and then dragged through the rubble. And so we have to think, people who are European residents, is that our future, right? Is that what's happening next? That what will happen to Ukraine? Will that then spread like the plague west?
That's the real concern. Absolutely right. And as the warden in our chat here on YouTube says, you know damn well it's going to be longer. Yeah, it's not going into 2024. You know damn well it's going to be much, much longer.
And so people in the West will be able to think like, oh, Ukraine, it wasn't ever really that great before anyway, and now it's a war zone. That's what it is.
Yeah.
You know, and we will forget the same way we forget that Syria was prosperous, that Libya was prosperous, and on its way to more prosperity. Please go ahead. Sorry.
Tell me a place that the United States has established a presence and then left. Tell me one place. Because once we establish a presence, we do not leave.
No, it's like Hydra, and it reaches its tentacles into everything. Where do we go that we... Oh, Japan? No, sorry. Philippines? No. Yeah, you can't think of a place.
The moon?
The moon... Yeah, there's one. Although...
Okay, you got me.
Trash.
The moon base. So what's important to understand is that everything is going, though, according to plan. And on the Ukrainian side of things, Ukraine was never meant to win this war. That was never part of the plan. There was never a chance that was ever going to happen to begin with. The United States and its NATO allies have been using Ukraine since 2014. Actually, before that, but really in earnest in 2014. From the very beginning, after installing a puppet government to do its bidding, all with the singular purpose that is now coming directly into view. It was never about Ukraine's freedom. It was always about using Ukrainian men as cannon fodder to try to degrade Russia's military. And one of Ukraine's neo-Nazi military leaders admits that this was always the plan. Watch, this is really telling.
Але стільки зброї не тому, що ми хороші, як нам кажуть, нам допомагає Захід, бо вони хочуть нам блага, тому що ми виконуємо задачі Заходу. Тому що ми єдині, хто готові їх виконувати, бо нам весело, нам прикольно убивати і прикольно воювати. І вони думали, вау, давайте вже подивимося, що це буде. Тому виник цей новий альянс, про який зараз говорять там Туреччина, Польща, Британія, Україна. Тут ми тут флагман. Тому що ми затіяли війну, якої не було вже останніх 60 років. Так от.
Yeah, so we are the flagmen. This was the plan. This was the plan all along. It's an unbelievable statement. But we knew we were being used in this way. So we have all of these guys who are like kind of bloodthirsty. Here's an idea, give them all weapons. So they knew it from the beginning, that all of these Nazis running around, what if we gave them weapons and told them, hey, why don't you guys go shoot some Russians? But right now you guys are using baseball bats. But what if NATO stepped in and gave you guys some weapons? How would that sound? Oh, we would love that. That was all part of the plan. And did it work? Well, in fact, it of course provoked the war in Ukraine. In fact, the very same year that the United States and NATO allies backed the coup in Ukraine, which overthrew a democratically elected government and installed a puppet regime to do the West's bidding, the BBC, of all networks, did the unthinkable. They released a documentary and a report on the rise of neo-Nazis in Ukraine. They didn't know it at the time that the United States and its allies were actively supporting these groups to carry out these attacks against the people living in eastern Ukraine at the time, stoking a war with Russia. But again, this is not some right-wing publication. This is the BBC. Watch this report on the rise of neo-Nazis. Watch.
Wow.
This is James. James left his 9-to-5 job and is now making over $50,000 a month online. James is implementing.
Here we are.
In place of the defiant speeches, the somber strains of Beethoven now ring out over Independence Square. This revolution is moving into a new phase. But amidst the flowers and the children's tributes, flashes of something more sinister. Groups of armed men strut through the square with dubious iconography.
Dubious.
That yellow armband is a Volksangel, a German symbol used by several SS divisions during the Second World War. Far-right graffiti is appearing, daubed on the walls of the city. A group calling itself the Right Sector is perhaps the largest. Its members can be seen marching around Kiev in columns of about a dozen. Mostly they carry baseball bats.
And then NATO had an idea. Hey, what if we take away those baseball bats? Those are ineffective. You can only hit or kill one person at a time, really, unless you line up a whole bunch of people. What if we gave them guns? NATO's brilliant, right? And what if we gave them javelin missiles? What if we gave them other things that could really wreak havoc and create a genocide, really?
Pretty much what happened to Adolf Schicklgruber, is it not? Somebody funded him? Like the Harriman brothers and the Bush family. Yeah. Do your research on that one. Anyway, we'll go ahead and get out. The wars are here. Yeah. I'll say they are. Or certainly they have began. How about that? This is 2nd Ezra 16 and 18. The beginning of sorrows and great mourning, the beginning of famine and great death, and you can best believe we'll be seeing famine and great death very soon. The beginning of wars. Okay? Forever wars. And the power shall stand in fear, the beginning of evils. What shall I do when these evils shall come? Pray to the Lord, repent, be converted, pray, and, stay in the strong tower of Yahweh Shem Yahushua. So with that, we hope that the elect are edified, you brothers and sisters. With that, we can say shalom.